I have learned enough to detest all men. Only nations may be revered. Swain, the Noxian Grand General, born into a patrician family, one of many to exist since the first walls were raised around Noxus, Jericho Swain seemed destined for a life of privilege. The noble houses had played a key role in Borum Darkwill's rise to power, stoking rhetoric that their proud heritage was the nation's greatest strength. However, many hungered for greater influence, plotting against Darkwill in a secret cabal, united by nothing more than the symbol of a black rose. Uncovering their intrigue, Swain personally executed the most prominent conspirators. Among them were his own parents, whose whispers of a pale woman had first alerted him of the danger to Noxus, which he valued more than house or kin. They sought a power, a shapeless voice cackling in the darkness of the immortal bastion, something like a raven's caw. For exposing the cabal, Swain was granted a commission in the Noxian army, far from anything he had ever known. There he learned firsthand that the Empire was not strong because of Noxians, as he had believed, but because of the way it could unite all men in spite of their origins. On the front lines, a foreign slave could be the equal of a high-born noble. But still, Swain found only darkness in the wake of each battle. Clouds of carrion crows. After securing the western borders, Swain's own reputation was secured in Shurima, where his forces raised countless Noxtera above the desert sands. Yet, in time, it became clear that greed was the sole purpose driving the Empire forward. Fighting wars on too many fronts, lusting over magical relics, the aging Borum Darkwill was clearly growing unhinged. When Noxus invaded Ionia, Darkwill began to move even more brazenly, retasking entire warbands to scour the land for anything rumored to extend a mortal lifespan. With Swain's forces depleted, it became nearly impossible to engage the enemy. Finally, at the Battle of the Placidium, after luring the local militia into what should have been a trap, Swain's war host was overrun. His veterans were routed, and Swain was gravely wounded, his knee shattered, Ionian blades cleaving through his left arm. As he lay on the verge of death, a raven approached to feed, and Swain felt an old, familiar darkness press upon him again. But he would not let it take him. He could not. Staring into the bird's eye, he saw reflections of the evil strangling the heart of Noxus. A black rose, the pale woman, and her puppet emperor. Swain realized that he had not defeated the hidden cabal, and they had betrayed him to what should have been his death after seducing Darkwill, the man they failed to overthrow. All this was glimpsed, not in the mind of a raven, but something more. The power his parents had been seeking, the demonic eyes blazing in the dark. Cast out of the military for his failure, considered nothing more than a cripple, Swain set about uncovering what truly lay within the immortal bastion, an ancient entity preying upon the dying and consuming their secrets, as it had attempted to consume his own. Swain stared into that darkness, seeing what even it could not, a way to wield it. Though his meticulous preparations took many years, Swain and his remaining allies seized control of Noxus in a single night. Physically restored by the demon, he crushed Darkwill in full view of his followers, leaving the throne shattered and empty. Swain's vision for the future of Noxus is one of strength through unity. He has pulled back the war hosts from Darkwill's unwinnable campaigns, and with the establishment of the Trifarics, ensured that no individual can rule unopposed. He embraces any who will pledge themselves to the Empire, even the Black Rose, though he knows in secret they still plot against him. Gathering knowledge as the demon did before him, Swain has foreseen far greater dangers lurking just beyond. However, many Noxians secretly wonder if the darkness they face will pale in comparison to the dark things Swain has done. The sacrifices are only beginning for the good of Noxus. The Black Powder Plot by David Slagle. He arrived at the camp only moments before the strategy council was to begin, flanked by a small honor guard, each hand-picked from the Triforian Legion. They remained at the entrance as I watched him approach. Some men cast a shadow greater than themselves, but few could bring a darkness such as this, one that circled above us and hungrily cawed. In a way, the ravens that seemed to follow him around the camp were a grim reminder of every warrior's fate. The tattered cloth in their beaks, a match for the state of our own banners. Yet, as he strode into the remains of the war tent, I realized I had not prepared myself for how truly mortal he looked. There was gray in his hair, framed by a crimson sky choking on ash. His battle-worn armor gave way to a functional coat, and he kept his arms tightly within its folds, as I imagined one of his lineage might. I smiled, for he was still, at his heart, a gentleman. He wore no signs of rank beyond the telltale scars of a soldier who had seen his share of bloodshed. There were many gathered now for the council, who demanded more fear and respect, swaying their war hosts with powerful displays of strength. Each of them seemed more than capable of breaking the man before us. But somehow, this was the man who led us all, the Grand General of Noxus. Looking at him, I could feel there was something I could not place, no matter how closely I looked. Something truly unknowable, perhaps. Perhaps it was because there was something unknowable about this man that so many flocked to his side. Whatever the draw, Jericho Swain stood before us now, and it was far too late for me to turn back. 5 war hosts had marched onto the rock-run plain, but it had been only a matter of weeks before the locals had shattered our positions. They blasted through our hastily constructed berms with explosive powder, mined from hills that seemed even more barren than those of home. Disaster had built upon disaster, until Swain himself had no choice but to intervene. I had made sure of that. For months I had prepared. I had sent Warmisons deep into the mines. I had mapped every detail, every conceivable twist of the land, and the fates upon which Noxus now balanced, the whispers that gave each moment shape. My ear itched at the the memory of the pale woman's words, of the moment she first commanded me and gave voice to our plot. Everything was in place. I had accounted for it all. Here, where the earth opened into a maze of canyons impossible to escape, I and I alone would determine the future of the Empire. After all, was that not what Swain had called upon this council to do? My trusted generals, Swain said finally. The power in his voice rang out like the drawing of a blade. He paused as if giving us a moment to test ourselves against its keen edge. Tell me how Noxus may prevail. There are 12 warbarks here, in the hills, Leto began, pointing to a spot on the map already worn white by his attention. Each drawn by a basilisk. Send him before the war bands, and we'll be marching over the enemy dead. Those beasts would rut with a hedge of rusty spears if we let them. He smiled, pleased at his own cunning. But Swain was more concerned with the wine being poured into his glass. Will it be poison? His eyes seemed to ask as he peered around the table. I stared at my reflection in his armor. I would betray nothing of my intent. We can scarcely control the basilisks ourselves, Swain finally murmured, carefully regarding the fine Ionian vintage. Imagine even a single explosive dropped by a sapper within earshot of the beasts, and then tell me, in your imagination, who runs first. The basilisks with their tails between their legs, or your vaunted war host. We scorch the earth then, Mayella petitioned before Leto could respond, the words flying wildly from her mouth. Set fire to the pitch they've laid to burn on our advance. Drive them out of those damn mines. Swain sighed. We came here for the very earth you would burn, though I suppose it is too much to expect you to know the uses of saltpeter. He swirled the wine in his glass, betraying a hint of disappointment. All you have done so far is bury your own men with it. The red blades are still sharp. Jonet spat impatiently from the shadows where he lurked, the darkness seeming almost bright against his Shuriman skin. We'll enter the mines after dusk, take out their leaders. Clean or messy, doesn't matter. An admirable strategy, Swain laughed. But those leaders are not soldiers. Not yet. Our enemy here merely follows whomever bellows the loudest. Kill one, and there will be 3 bellowing by morning. I laughed, nodding to the frowning leader of the Red Blades. For a moment, I was afraid you'd find a way for us to actually win, Jonet. Silence fell around the table. The candles were burning low beside the maps. This was my moment. The pale woman would be pleased. I would say her name as I sent our Grand General to oblivion. The truth is, you cannot win this battle, I continued. No one can fight death, not even the ruler of Noxus. Dark and the others watched as I carefully drew the flint striker from my tunic. The fuse line was already in my other hand. Leto, aging hero of the siege of Fenrath, bristled. "Granth, what are you doing?" he growled, glancing down at the crude demolition charge I had carefully positioned under the table barely an hour before. "You would threaten the Grand General. This is treason." Still, none of them dared approach me. I held the striker over the fuse, ready, except someone was laughing. It took me a moment to realize who it was. "And there, General Granth is the only one who has the right of it." Swain chuckled, smoothing the wrinkles from his coat. "He alone understands. The rest of you see a battle and ask what you must do to avoid defeat. But some battles cannot be won. Sometimes the only strategy is to burn, to charge into the flames, knowing full well you will die, but that 20,000 march behind you, and that behind them there is a greater power." He let his coat fall open to reveal. "Granth and I," he said with a cruel smile, "we always look for what must be sacrificed in order to win." Miela lunged for my trembling hands, Leto too, but it was Swain's inhuman grip that clamped around my throat, hefting me from the ground, the unlit fuse forgotten. "If only you could tell her yourself how you failed," the Grand General whispered, his voice rumbling with the wrath of eons. "If only she too could heed the wisdom of the dead." I tried to scream then, to confess it all, to somehow beg for forgiveness. But there is nothing now, save for the soft murmur of whispers. I spill my secrets, this tale, into your ears, fading like the rustling of wings as the raven cries its carrion caw. The Grand General's whisper. They thought Jericho Swain was finished the day he fell on the Ionian front. His legs shattered, his army broke, and the blackbirds gathered, dragged from the mud by soldiers who no longer believed in him. Swain stared into defeat with one unblinking eye. Noxus had no mercy for the weak. A crippled general was already a corpse, just one that hadn't stopped breathing yet. But Swain listened. Where others heard the cries of dying men, he heard secrets. The ravens circled closer, their feathers slick with something darker than blood. One landed beside him, head tilted, eyes glowing with a knowing red. In that moment, between life and execution, Swain made a choice. He reached back. The demon answered. Braum, the demon of secrets, tore through his shattered body and remade it. Bone burned, flesh screamed. When Swain rose from the battlefield, his cane was carved from defiance, his missing arm blade. They underestimated what Swain had become. He saw every lie whispered in marble halls, every plot carried in silken smiles. One by one, the conspirators fell, not to brute force, but to truth weaponized. When the dust settled, Swain stood at the heart of the empire. Not a tyrant, not a savior, a necessary evil. Now, as Grand General, Swain rules with an iron mind and a demon's patience. Ravens perch on battlements and shoulders alike, feeding him the hidden fears of generals, nobles, and enemies beyond Noxus borders. He does not conquer for glory. He conquers because the world is weak, and weakness, Swain knows better than anyone, invites annihilation. So let them fear him. Let them whisper his name. In Noxus, secrets do not stay buried. They rise on black wings. Swain, the weight of empire. Before Jericho Swain became the Grand General of Noxus, before ravens obeyed his call and shadows bent to his will, he was simply a man who believed in the empire. He was born to a minor noble house, old blood, but not powerful enough to matter. In Noxus, lineage was a blade, sharp only if you knew how to wield it. Swain learned early that strength was not always measured by muscle or steel, but by foresight. While other boys trained with swords, Swain trained his mind. He listened, he watched, he remembered. Noxus rewarded this. He rose quickly through the military ranks, not through blind aggression, but through calculated sacrifice. Swain understood a truth few generals dared to admit. Victory demanded loss, lives, territory, reputation. He was willing to trade them all if the final outcome favored the empire. Soldiers whispered his name with respect and unease. Then came Ionia. The campaign was meant to be decisive. Noxus would crush the scattered provinces, and Swain would return as a conquering hero. Instead, the land itself seemed to rebel. Guerrilla warfare bled the army dry. Magic twisted the battlefield into something ancient and hostile, and betrayal waited at the center. High command, fearing Swain's growing influence, fed him false intelligence. His forces marched into a trap laid by both Ionian resistance and Noxian ambition. When the ambush fell, the sky burned with spells, and the ground drank deeply of blood. Swain fought until his body failed him. A blade shattered his knee. Magic tore through his arm. He collapsed among the dead as the screams faded into silence. Ravens gathered, drawn by carnage and something else, something older than the empire itself. As soldiers dragged him from the field in chains, accused of treason and failure, Swain understood the truth. Noxus had already condemned him. That night, fevered and broken, he felt a presence coil around his thoughts. A voice, neither kind nor cruel, whispered secrets that no living being should know. Names of traitors, plans unspoken, futures half-formed. Raum. The demon did not offer salvation. It offered knowledge. Swain accepted. When the chains fell away, they hit the floor of the execution chamber. Shadow replaced flesh. His ruined arm was reborn in darkness, grasping truth itself. He escaped not through force, but inevitability. Swain returned to Noxus a different creature. He moved through the capital like a ghost, uncovering conspiracies layer by layer. Each raven carried whispers to his ear, a general skimming coin, a noble selling soldiers, a counselor plotting regicide. He did not rush, he waited. When he struck, it was final. The old ruling council fell in a single night. Some executed, some exposed, some driven mad by their own secrets laid bare. In their place rose the Triferics. Vision, might, and guile. Swain was guile. As Grand General, Swain reshaped Noxus not into a kingdom of brute force, but into a machine that devoured weakness. Merit replaced bloodline, strength replaced tradition. Even enemies, if capable, were offered purpose. Yet the cost was immense. Realm was never silent. Every secret learned fed the demon, and every truth stolen weighed on Swain's soul. He knew how every man would betray, every ally would fall. To rule with such knowledge was to stand alone. Still, Swain endures. On the battlefield, he unleashes the demon's power, becoming a storm of ravens and shadow, draining life from those foolish enough to oppose him. In the war room, he is colder still, planning conflicts years in advance, preparing for threats no one else can see, because Swain has looked beyond the borders of Runeterra. He knows something is coming, something that will not care for nations or ideals, something that will devour the world as easily as Noxus devours its enemies. And when that day comes, Swain intends for Noxus to stand ready, even if it must become a monster to survive. He does not seek love. He does not seek redemption. He seeks a future. And if the price is his humanity,